She kept his daughter a secret for 7 years. Tonight, that secret just walked into the room. Ethan Hale froze in the doorway of a rundown diner, rain dripping from his designer suit onto cracked linoleum. His blue eyes locked onto the woman behind the counter, the girl who'd vanished from his life 15 years ago without explanation, without goodbye, without mercy. Lena Wells. The only woman he'd ever loved. The only woman who'd ever destroyed him. Her hands trembled as she poured coffee, refusing to look up. She knew if she met his gaze, he'd see through every lie she'd told herself to survive. Then a small voice shattered the silence. "Mama?" A little girl appeared from the back room. 7 years old. Golden brown curls. Warm brown skin. And piercing blue eyes that mirrored Ethan's exactly. The color drained from his face. Lena's world tilted. Because across town, in a glass tower overlooking the city, Ethan's mother, the woman who destroyed them once before, was already making a phone call that would rip this family apart all over again. Welcome back to Mr. Harrington's Stories, where love, betrayal, and billion-dollar secrets collide. Before we dive deeper, let's start with a blessing. May this week bring you unexpected grace, the courage to face hard truths, and the strength to protect what matters most. If you're ready for this journey, type present in the comments right now. Let me see you. And if you believe that some loves are worth fighting for, no matter how much time has passed, hit that subscribe button. Because the trolls who don't believe in second chances, they won't. Now, let's begin. The diner was nearly empty. Just 2 truckers in the corner booth nursing lukewarm coffee and a teenager scrolling through his phone by the window. The kind of quiet that felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Lena moved through the space on autopilot, refilling sugar dispensers that were already full, wiping down tables that didn't need attention. Anything to keep her hands busy. Anything to keep her mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. She'd gotten good at this over the years. The art of staying present while living in the past. The skill of smiling through exhaustion. The discipline of never letting anyone see the cracks. But then the door chimed. And everything she'd built to protect herself shattered in an instant. He stood in the entrance, drenched from the rain, his tailored charcoal suit clinging to his frame like a second skin. Water dripped from his golden hair onto the floor, pooling at his feet. But it wasn't the rain that made him look undone. It was his eyes. Those impossibly blue eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Ethan Hale. Lena's breath caught. Her vision blurred at the edges. The coffee pot in her hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She forced herself to keep moving, to pour the coffee into a mug even though her hands were shaking so badly she nearly missed. She couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, he'd see everything. The years of struggling. The nights she'd cried herself to sleep. The mornings she'd woken up wondering if she'd made the right choice. But Ethan didn't move. He just stood there frozen, staring at her like he'd seen something impossible. Like the dead had risen. Like the universe had split open and rewritten itself. His lips parted. His voice came out raw, barely more than a whisper. "Lena, is it really you?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed. Her lungs had forgotten how to work. She set the coffee pot down before she dropped it, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. The silence between them was deafening. 15 years of unanswered questions hung in the air like smoke. 15 years of wondering what if. 15 years of a love that had never really died, just gone into hiding. And then from the back room, a voice shattered the moment. "Mama?" Lena's heart stopped. No. Not now. Not like this. The little girl appeared in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear, her golden brown curls falling around her face in soft waves. She was small for 7, delicate in the way children are before the world teaches them to be anything else. Her brown skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her smile was innocent, unburdened by the weight of secrets. But it was her eyes that changed everything. Blue. Piercing. Unmistakable. Ethan's eyes. The color drained from his face. His entire body went rigid, his breath catching in his chest like he'd been struck. He stared at the little girl, his mind racing, refusing to accept what his heart already knew. Lena couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. She'd known this moment would come eventually. She'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head, imagined every possible version of this conversation. But nothing had prepared her for the look on his face. The shock. The disbelief. The devastation. The little girl tilted her head, studying Ethan with the kind of curiosity only children possess. "Are you Mama's friend?" Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat had closed. His legs felt like they might give out. He looked at Lena, his eyes searching hers for an explanation, for a denial, for anything that would make this make sense. But Lena had no words. Only tears that burned at the corners of her eyes, threatening to spill over. The truth was standing right there, 3 feet tall, holding a teddy bear and asking innocent questions. The truth Lena had buried for 7 years. The truth that was about to destroy everything. 15 years earlier, Lena Wells had walked the marble hallways of Crestwood Prep like she belonged there. Not because she didn't, not by birth or wealth or privilege, but because she refused to let anyone make her feel small. She was 17, brilliant, and on a full academic scholarship. The only black girl in most of her classes. The only one who'd earned her seat at the table while everyone else had inherited theirs. She kept her head high. Did her work. Stayed invisible. Until Ethan Hale noticed her. He was everything she wasn't. Golden-haired. Blue-eyed. Born into a dynasty that built cities and owned industries. His family name opened doors before he even knocked. His future was written in stone, Harvard, then Wharton, then the corner office of Hale Industries. But when he looked at Lena in AP history, something shifted. She'd been arguing with the teacher about the causes of the Civil War, her voice steady and unapologetic, refusing to back down even when the room went silent. Ethan had watched from the back row, fascinated. After class, he'd caught up with her in the hallway. "You're not wrong," he'd said. She'd looked at him like he was a puzzle she hadn't asked to solve. "I know. That should have been the end of it." But it wasn't. They started meeting in the library. Then the quad. Then under the bleachers after football practice, where the world couldn't see them and the rules didn't apply. He'd kiss her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. She'd let herself believe that love could conquer the distance between their worlds. They talked about the future. About leaving Crestwood behind and building something real. Something that belonged to them and no one else. But Margot Hale had other plans. Ethan's mother was a woman who controlled empires with a phone call and destroyed lives with a signature. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She didn't need to. Power, real power, was quiet. When she found out about Lena, she didn't confront her son. She simply made a call to the headmaster. By the end of the week, Lena's scholarship had been revoked. No explanation. No appeal. Just gone. Lena had packed her things in the middle of the night and left without a word. No goodbye. No explanation. Because what could she say? That his mother had one? That she'd been erased like she'd never mattered at all? Ethan had searched for her. 4 months, he'd written letters that never got answered. Hired investigators who came up empty. Driven through neighborhoods he'd never been to, knocking on doors, asking strangers if they'd seen a girl with dark skin and bright eyes who disappeared into thin air. He never found her. What he didn't know was that Lena had been 2 months pregnant when she left. Back in the present, the diner felt smaller. The air thicker. Lena watched Ethan stare at their daughter, and saw the exact moment the pieces clicked into place. His voice came out hoarse, barely audible. "How old is she?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ethan did the math in his head. 7 years. 15 years since she'd disappeared. 8 years since she'd have given birth. The timeline fit perfectly. Painfully. The little girl smiled at him, unaware of the earthquake happening around her. "Are you Mama's friend?" Ethan's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists at his sides. 15 years of grief and confusion and buried anger rose to the surface all at once, threatening to consume him. His voice came out cold. "We need to talk. Now." Lena closed the diner early, flipping the sign on the door and ushering the last customers out with apologies and promises of free coffee next time. She moved mechanically, her body going through motions while her mind spiraled. She sent her daughter to the back room with her coloring books and a snack, then turned to face the man she'd once loved more than her own life. They sat across from each other in a worn vinyl booth, the weight of 15 years pressing down between them like a physical force. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The rain hammered against the windows. The world outside kept moving, but inside that diner, time had stopped. Ethan spoke first, his voice shaking with a rage he was barely containing. "You kept my daughter from me. For 7 years." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Lena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You don't understand what your mother did to me." He leaned forward, his voice rising. "Then explain it to me, Lena. Explain how you thought it was okay to erase me from her life. From our life. She destroyed me, Ethan." Lena's voice cracked, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "She took everything. My scholarship. My future. I was 19 and homeless and pregnant, and I had nothing. No money. No family. No one." Ethan's face twisted with pain. "So you decided I deserved nothing either? You didn't think I had a right to know I had a daughter?" Lena's tears finally spilled over. "What was I supposed to do? Show up at your mansion with a baby and beg your mother to let me back into your life? She made it clear I didn't belong in your world, Ethan. She made it clear I never would." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Lena's phone buzzed on the table between them. She glanced down at the screen. An unknown number. A single text message that made her blood run cold. "He found you. Now everyone will know what you've been hiding." Her hands started shaking. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Someone knew. Someone had been watching. And they were about to use her secret to destroy everything. Ethan saw the terror on her face. "What is it?" Lena couldn't speak. She just turned the phone toward him, letting him read the message himself. His expression darkened. "Who sent this?" She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know." But somewhere deep in her gut, she had a terrible feeling she did know. Because there was only one person in the world who had the resources, the motive, and the cruelty to orchestrate something like this. Margot Hale. If you were Lena, would you have told Ethan the truth 15 years ago, or kept the secret to protect your child? Drop your answer below. Across the city, 53 floors above the streets where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, Margot Hale stood before floor-to-ceiling windows in her glass tower. The city sprawled beneath her like a kingdom she'd built with her own hands. And in many ways, she had. Hale Industries didn't just exist in Chicago, it owned pieces of it. Buildings. Land. Influence. Power. She held her phone delicately between manicured fingers, studying the photograph on the screen. A little girl with golden brown curls and blue eyes that didn't belong to the woman raising her. Eyes that belonged to Margot's son. Her assistant stood 3 feet behind her, hands clasped, spine straight, waiting for instructions. The young woman had learned long ago that Margot Hale didn't appreciate interruptions or unnecessary questions. She appreciated efficiency. Results. Silence until spoken to. Margot tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "What would you like me to do, ma'am?" Margot smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. The kind that made people nervous even when they didn't know why. Nothing. Yet. Let them think they're safe. She set the phone down on her desk and picked up the landline. Her fingers moved across the keypad with practiced precision. The call connected on the second ring. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I need you to find everything on Lena Wells. Bank accounts. Debts. Medical records. Employment history. Every parking ticket. Every late payment. Everything." There was a pause on the other end. A confirmation. An understanding that this wasn't a request, it was an order. Margot hung up without another word. She turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. She'd gotten rid of Lena Wells 15 years ago with a single phone call. She wasn't about to let some waitress with delusions of grandeur waltz back into her son's life and destroy everything she'd built for him. Ethan didn't understand yet. But he would. He always did, eventually. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of heavy knocking on her apartment door. The kind of knocking that didn't stop. That didn't wait politely. That demanded to be answered. Her heart jumped into her throat. She glanced at the clock. 7:15. Her daughter was still asleep in the tiny bedroom they shared, curled under a worn quilt with her teddy bear tucked under one arm. The knocking came again. Louder this time. Lena pulled on a robe and moved toward the door, her pulse racing. She looked through the peephole and felt the air leave her lungs. Ethan. She opened the door slowly, her hand still gripping the knob like it was the only thing keeping her upright. He stood in the hallway, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He didn't look like the boy she'd loved 15 years ago. He looked like the man who'd built an empire in her absence. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, his presence filling the small space instantly. I want a DNA test. And I want custody arrangements. This isn't a negotiation. Lena's heart shattered. She'd expected anger. She'd expected questions. But this cold clinical demand, felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You think I kept her from you out of spite? Ethan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. What am I supposed to think, Lena? You disappeared. You had my child. And you never told me. I was 19, Ethan. Her voice broke. Homeless. Your mother made sure I had nothing. No scholarship. No home. No future. I was sleeping on a friend's couch when I found out I was pregnant. What was I supposed to do? Show up at your door with a baby and beg? Ethan's expression flickered, just for a moment. Something like pain crossed his face before he locked it down again. That doesn't change the fact that you lied to me for 7 years. Before Lena could respond, a small voice came from the bedroom doorway. Mama, why is he yelling? Lena's heart broke all over again. She turned to see her daughter standing there in her pajamas, her teddy bear clutched to her chest, her blue eyes wide with fear. Lena crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt down, pulling her daughter into her arms. It's okay, baby. Everything's okay. But it wasn't. And they both knew it. Ethan stared at the little girl, his daughter, and something in his chest cracked open. She looked so small. So fragile. So completely unaware of the storm that was about to tear her world apart. He took a breath, forcing his voice to soften. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother's shoulder, studying him with cautious curiosity. Who are you? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. What was he supposed to say? That he was her father? That he just found out she existed? That her entire life had been built on a secret he was only now beginning to understand? Lena answered for him, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. He's an old friend, sweetheart. Go back to bed, okay? I'll make you pancakes in a little bit. The little girl hesitated, then nodded and padded back to the bedroom, leaving Ethan and Lena alone in the suffocating silence. Ethan's voice came out rough. What's her name? Lena swallowed hard. Aria. He repeated it softly, like he was trying it out, testing how it felt on his tongue. Aria. For a moment, the anger between them dissolved. For a moment, they were just 2 broken people standing in a crumbling apartment, staring at the wreckage of a love that had never really ended. But then Ethan's jaw tightened again. I'll have my lawyer contact you. We'll arrange the DNA test this week. He turned and walked out, leaving Lena standing in the middle of her apartment, tears streaming down her face, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 2 days later, Lena was wiping down tables at the diner when a courier walked in. He handed her a thick manila envelope and left without a word. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of Aria leaving school. Playing at the park. Sitting in the diner's back room doing her homework. Someone had been watching them. Following them. Documenting their lives. Beneath the photos were copies of medical records. Birth certificates. School enrollment forms. Everything that proved Aria existed. Everything that proved Lena had been hiding her. And at the bottom of the envelope, a single note written in elegant script. You kept her from him. Now the courts will keep her from you. Unless you disappear again. Lena's vision blurred. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Margot Hale was threatening to take her daughter. To use the courts. To paint Lena as an unfit mother who'd kept a child from her father out of malice. And the worst part? She might actually succeed. Lena's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the phone as she dialed Ethan's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice clipped and professional. Your mother knows. Lena's voice broke. She's going after Aria. There was a pause. What are you talking about? Lena told him about the envelope, the photographs, the medical records, the threat hidden in elegant handwriting. Ethan's silence was deafening. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could feel the fury radiating through the phone. Finally he spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. I'll handle my mother. Ethan, please. But this doesn't change what you did, Lena. His words were ice. You still lied. You still kept her from me. And I don't know if I can forgive that. He hung up before she could respond. Lena stood in the middle of the empty diner, the envelope clutched in her shaking hands, and realized she was completely alone. No one was coming to save her. No one was going to fight for her. She was on her own. Just like she'd been 15 years ago. 3 days later, Margot Hale orchestrated what she called a chance encounter at the annual Hale Foundation Charity Gala. It was the kind of event that made headlines. Politicians, CEOs, old money rubbing elbows with new money while photographers captured every moment. Ethan had been required to attend since he was 16. It was part of his role, part of the legacy, part of the image his mother had carefully constructed over decades. But this year, he barely noticed the chandeliers or the champagne or the perfectly orchestrated small talk. His mind was somewhere else. On a little girl with blue eyes who looked just like him. On a woman who disappeared from his life twice now. On a mother who destroyed everything he'd ever loved. Lena shouldn't have come. She knew that. But she was desperate. Desperate to talk to Ethan. Desperate to make him understand. Desperate to find a way out of the nightmare Margot was constructing around her. She'd borrowed a dress from a coworker. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would help her blend in with the women dripping in diamonds and designer labels. But it was enough to get her through the door. She spotted Ethan across the ballroom, standing near the bar, his expression distant. She started toward him, weaving through the crowd, her heart pounding. But Margot saw her first. "Oh, how lovely to see you again, Miss Wells." Margot's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Cameras swiveled in their direction. Lena froze. Margot glided toward her, a champagne flute in one hand, a smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Still working at that little diner, I hear?" The crowd whispered. Murmured. Lena could feel their eyes on her. Judging. Calculating. Wondering who this woman was and why Margot Hale was speaking to her. Margot leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper only Lena could hear. "If you think my son will choose you over his legacy, you're more deluded than I thought." Lena's throat closed. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream. To shout. To tell everyone in that room exactly what kind of monster Margot Hale really was. But she couldn't. Because Margot held all the power. All the resources. All the weapons. Across the room, Ethan watched the exchange, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping his glass so tightly it was a miracle it didn't shatter. He was torn. Furious at his mother for her cruelty. Furious at Lena for her lies. Furious at himself for still caring. Margot straightened, her smile widening as cameras flashed. She raised her champagne flute in a mock toast, her voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "To old friends." Lena turned and walked out of the ballroom, her vision blurred with tears, her heart shattered into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. Margot had just declared war. And Lena had nowhere left to run. Do you think Ethan will side with Lena or his mother? And would you forgive someone who kept your child a secret? Let me know below. Ethan stood outside his mother's office on the 53rd floor, his hand hovering over the door handle. He'd walked these halls 1,000 times. Sat in meetings in this very room. Made decisions that shaped the future of Hale Industries. But he'd never felt this kind of fury before. The kind that burned cold. The kind that clarified everything. He pushed the door open without knocking. Margot sat behind her desk, perfectly composed, a pen in her hand as she reviewed contracts. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She knew he was coming. "What did you do to Lena 15 years ago?" His voice was steady. Too steady. The kind of calm that preceded a storm. Margot set her pen down slowly, meeting his gaze with the same icy composure she'd worn for decades. "I protected you. That girl was a distraction. A liability. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. She was pregnant. With my child. And you knew. For the first time in his life, he saw his mother's mask slip. Just for a second. A flicker of something that might have been guilt, or maybe just irritation at being caught. I did what any mother would do. Her voice was clipped, defensive. I secured your future. Ethan's laugh was bitter, hollow. You didn't secure anything. You destroyed the only person I ever loved. Margot stood, her voice rising. You were 17 years old, Ethan. You had no idea what love was. You had Harvard ahead of you. Wharton. A legacy to inherit. And you were going to throw it all away for some scholarship girl who didn't belong in our world. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. She belonged in my world because I chose her. And you took that choice away from me. You took 15 years away from me. You took my daughter away from me. Margot's jaw tightened. I did what was necessary. No. Ethan's voice cracked. You did what was cruel. And I will never forgive you for it. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. The bridge between mother and son wasn't just damaged. It was burned to ash. Margot stood alone in her office, staring at the empty doorway, her hands trembling for the first time in decades. She'd built an empire. Secured a legacy. Protected her son from mistakes that could have ruined him. But as she stood there in the silence, she realized she'd lost him anyway. Lena's apartment was chaos. Boxes everywhere. Clothes folded and stacked. Her daughter's toys packed away in worn duffel bags. She moved mechanically, her mind numb, her heart shattered. She couldn't fight Margot Hale. She had no money. No power. No lawyers who could stand against the legal machine a billionaire could deploy. So she was doing the only thing she could. She was running. Again. Arya sat on the couch, clutching her teddy bear, watching her mother pack with wide, frightened eyes. Where are we going, Mama? Lena forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere new, baby. Somewhere safe. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. Because nowhere was safe when Margot Hale wanted you gone. A knock at the door made her freeze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She moved toward the peephole, her breath shallow, expecting to see a courier with more threats. More photographs. More evidence that Margot was tightening the noose. But it wasn't a courier. It was Ethan. She opened the door slowly, confusion and fear warring in her chest. He stood there, breathless, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled like he'd been running. His eyes found hers, and something in them made her knees weak. Don't go. His voice was raw. Desperate. Lena shook her head, tears already streaming down her face. I can't fight her, Ethan. She'll take Arya. She'll destroy us both. I have to leave. Ethan stepped inside, closing the distance between them. Then we fight her together. Lena stared at him, disbelief flooding her features. Why would you do that? You don't even trust me. You think I lied to you. You think. I spent 15 years wondering what happened to you. His voice broke. 15 years thinking you just walked away. That I didn't matter. That what we had didn't matter. And now that I know the truth, now that I know my mother destroyed you, destroyed us, I'm not losing you again. Lena's breath caught. You mean that? Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle, tentative, like he was afraid she might disappear again. I mean it. We do this together. Or we don't do it at all. For the first time in 15 years, Lena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. 3 weeks later, they stood in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and broken families. Margot had moved fast, filing for emergency custody, claiming Lena was an unfit mother. Her lawyers were sharp, expensive, ruthless. They painted Lena as unstable, irresponsible, a woman who'd kept a child from her father out of spite and malice. Lena sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room could hear it. She had a court-appointed lawyer who was kind but overworked, no match for the legal army Margot had assembled. But then Ethan took the stand. He'd refused to sit with his mother. Refused to let her lawyers speak for him. He demanded to testify. To tell the truth. All of it. He looked directly at the judge, his voice steady, clear. 15 years ago, My mother erased Lena's scholarship because she didn't approve of our relationship. Lena was 19, homeless, pregnant, and she had no way to reach me because my mother made sure of that. Margot's lawyer stood, objecting, trying to interrupt. But Ethan didn't stop. Lena didn't keep my daughter from me out of cruelty. She kept her safe from a family that would have destroyed them both. And I don't blame her for that. I blame myself for not finding her sooner. And I blame my mother for making sure I never could. The courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward, studying Ethan carefully, then turned her gaze to Margot, whose face had gone rigid, her composure cracking at the edges. After what felt like an eternity, the judge spoke. The court finds no evidence that Ms. Wells is an unfit mother. Custody will remain with her. Visitation arrangements between Ms. Wells and Mr. Hale can be worked out privately. Margot's face twisted with fury. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stormed out of the courtroom without a word. Lena sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to believe it was over. That she'd won. That Arya was safe. Ethan crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. We did it. Lena nodded, her voice breaking. We did it. Weeks later, Lena and Arya moved into a modest apartment on the quieter side of the city. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms. A small kitchen. But it was theirs. Safe. Warm. A place where Margot's shadow couldn't reach. Ethan visited every evening after work. At first, it was awkward. Arya didn't know him. Didn't understand why this man with blue eyes like hers kept showing up with books and toys and patient smiles. But slowly, carefully, he built a bridge. He read her bedtime stories. Helped with her homework. Sat on the floor playing with dolls he had no idea how to play with, but tried anyway because it made her laugh. One evening, Lena stood in the kitchen doorway, watching as Ethan and Arya sat on the couch together, a cartoon playing on the TV. Arya leaned against him, giggling at something on the screen, and Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his expression softer than Lena had ever seen it. He looked up and caught Lena watching. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile. Something hopeful. Later, after Arya had fallen asleep, Ethan and Lena sat on the couch in the dim light, the city glowing softly through the window. We lost 15 years. Ethan's voice was quiet. But we still have the rest. Lena smiled through her tears, reaching for his hand. One day at a time. He squeezed her hand gently, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. One day at a time. For the first time in 15 years, Lena let herself believe in the possibility of forever again. But across the city, in a glass tower that scraped the clouds, Margot Hale stood alone in her office. A glass of wine sat untouched on her desk. The city sprawled beneath her, indifferent to her fury. She'd lost this battle. The court had ruled against her. Ethan had chosen Lena. Her carefully constructed empire, built on control and calculated decisions, had crumbled in the face of something she'd never understood. Love. But Margot Hale didn't accept defeat. She never had. She'd built dynasties. Destroyed competitors. Outlasted anyone who dared challenge her. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed a number she'd kept for emergencies. The call connected on the first ring. Her voice was cold, precise. I need you to dig deeper. There has to be something. A pause. A confirmation. Margot hung up and turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. She'd lost her son. But she hadn't lost the war. Not yet. Some loves are worth fighting for. Some secrets are worth protecting. And some wars never truly end. But for tonight, in a small apartment on the edge of Chicago, a family that was torn apart 15 years ago is finally whole again. A mother who fought for her daughter. A father who chose love over legacy. And a little girl who finally has both her parents under the same roof. The road ahead won't be easy. Margot Hale is still out there, plotting, scheming, refusing to let go. But for the first time in 15 years, Lena isn't afraid. Because she's not alone anymore. And sometimes, that's all the strength you need. Do you think Margot will ever stop trying to destroy Lena? And do you believe Ethan and Lena can truly rebuild what they lost? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where love fights back and families find their way home. Until next time, may you always have the courage to fight for what matters most.